Okay, I think that's got it. Last time we finished up talking about dementia and stroke. We've seen the Amen film, and so we're picking it up here. We really kind of talked about this split brain thing. The doctors had, if you remember, I told you about the doctors who had the patient who was epileptic, and they could not figure out how to help him, and so they went ahead and severed the corpus callosum. Here's the doctors. And in doing that, they found the opportunity to kind of decide, did the right brain have some specific functions and did the left brain have specific functions? And this kind of opened up the opportunity to pursue that. Now, we know that it's not quite as polarized as we have said before, because like the film said, women use both sides very, very well. But we do know there are some things about the brain and the hemispheres. The right side does, let's see here. The right side does add emotional content to speech. It's the insightful, creative element or area. It's the intuitive area. It likes to look at things in the whole, the big picture, okay? It can be subjective, or it's the subjective side. It's the feeling side, the emotional side. It likes to stay in the present and kind of look to the future. It's the appreciating side, the impetuous and risk-taking side. The right brain might say, it sounds like a really neat idea to get into a plane, go up about 3,000 to 4,000 feet, put a backpack on the back of yourself with some silk and some strings and jump out of the plane and say, this is fun. Okay? Well, the left brain's a logical, sequential part of the brain, analytical part. Okay? Oh, wait a second. Hey, Paul? Paul? Yeah.
Yes.
When you get a minute, sometimes I need to look up a new computer to printer.
Okay. The older one.
Yeah,
I can do that.
okay, thank you.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe before they swap you out the printers.
I just didn't know if you had or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure do.
The left brain's also the rational, objective type of thinking. It's detail oriented. It likes to look at the individual parts, analyze them. It's the logical, factual type of area. It's the word and language type of area. It likes to look at the present, but also enjoy the past. Math and science, it's the reality-based, the practical side, and it's the side that'll say, you think we want to go up into the plane and jump out? That just doesn't sound that good to me. I mean, you're depending your life on a piece of silk and some strings. Maybe we need to rethink that, okay? Then we've talked about neurotransmitters. There are 3 classes of neurotransmitters that we haven't talked about. One is what's called the small molecule. Another class is peptides, and the third are gases. The small molecule, one area or one type, is called the acetylcholine. It is used by the parasympathetic system to slow the heartbeat and to activate the gastric system when we're talking about the fight or flight, returning it back to homeostasis. Acetylcholine is very plentiful in the midbrain. It is involved in memory and movement. The next one is catecholamines. First one is norepinephrine. It's used by the sympathetic nervous system to enact fight or flight. So you've got the catecholamines that rev your body up for fight or flight, and then you've got the acetylcholine, which tones it back down. Another type, and we're going to camp here for a couple of minutes, another type of catecholamine is called serotonin. Now serotonin is very, very, very important in our mood and our ability to sleep. Now, it also has a lot to do with our impulse control. It is the only neurotransmitter that comes from something that we eat. Okay, it's made from something that we eat. What we eat, if it has what's called tryptophan, serotonin is made from tryptophan. Now, we have in about 1 month the National Day of Gluttony. We will spend weeks, if not months, planning on bringing friends and family together so that we can have a banquet, bring all this food out, eat until our stomachs are full and our eyes are gorging out. We pat our stomachs, go and lay before the TV and try to watch a football game, go into what's called a turkey coma. We will then sleep for several hours and then get up and repeat the process. Now, one of the reasons you get so sleepy on Thanksgiving is turkey is very, very high in tryptophan. Now, a couple of years ago, I must have had a turkey that was pure tryptophan because I cooked this turkey and it was good. And I ate like 2 slices of it, and I mean, it was like I was so drugged for 6 hours. I could not, I tried to open my eyelids and you couldn't have pried them open. Finally, I woke up and I was kind of groggy. I said, well, I'm hungry. I think I'll start eat a little snack. That was it for the rest of the night for me. I went into a pure turkey coma. It was amazing. Tryptophan, serotonin. There's one other thing you need to know about serotonin. People that have committed suicide, they have done autopsies and they have found that people who commit suicides very, very often have critically low serotonin levels. So if you know somebody who's depressed and they seem to be getting more depressed, they need to go see a doctor because they need to get some serotonin into their system. And they need to see a doctor to keep them from starting to think about alternative ways to solve their problems. Dopamine is called the pleasure neurotransmitter. It is important in being able to experience rewards and pleasure. It is very, very deeply implicated in addictions. We are finding out about the dopamine pathway, and it's very, very intricately connected into addictions. Also, it appears that people who have Parkinson's disease have a deficiency of dopamine, and people who are schizophrenic have an abundance of dopamine. Therefore, they have the more hyperactive type of movements, and the Parkinsons have more of the Parkinson type movements that we are associated with.
That sounds like a drug.
It almost sounds like a drug, but it's very, very important. Okay, GABA is an amino acid. It's implicated in several disorders, including the possibility of epilepsy. Glutamate. It is the major excitatory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. It's used by more neurons than any other neurotransmitter. That's really two important statements. The major excitatory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system, and it's used by more neurons than any other neurotransmitter. Peptides. In the late 1960s, they decided they wanted to see what happens to morphine in the brain. So they did what was called tagging it. They did that so they could trace what was going on in the brain. And what surprised them was that the morphine had receptor sites that it locked into. Now, let's think about this for a second. They had specially made receptor sites that was for them to lock into. Now, the question that they asked was, how is this? I mean, you know, like, it's not like we're sure that at some point somebody's going to get some morphine and needs a receptor site just in case. It doesn't work that way. Nature has a reason for everything it does. And so they started thinking about it and theorizing, and they said, what if the body produces a natural type of morphine, a natural opiate? Now, morphine, it lessens pain, it eases tension, and it increases the mood. Well, in the 70s, they discovered nature's morphine. We call them endorphins. Endorphins. And the reason that we have those receptor sites that morphine fits into is because of this natural morphine. Same receptor site, and it fits in and locks. Well, this natural morphine uses those all the time. We can cause endorphins to be released. It doesn't just have to be when there's some kind of injury that they're released. We know that if you start laughing and you laugh very hard, endorphins are going to be released. Think about this. If you go to a movie or you go to the comedy club and you've been laughing for a couple hours, when you come out, you feel pretty good. That's because of endorphins. Endorphins are our friends. Another thing is exercise. You know, you've heard of the runner's high. That's because of the endorphins. Well, there's also endorphins that are released because of eating chocolate. The darker, the better. If you're feeling bad, if you're feeling down, get yourself some dark chocolate and feast a little bit. If during PMS you say, I really want some chocolate, go for it. Don't worry about over the lips, onto the hips. Just take in some chocolate and make yourself feel better, okay? If you have a lady friend and you have to drop some bad news on her, give her a pound of dark chocolate first and load her up with that and then drop the bomb. You know, I'm giving y'all some good advice here, okay? That is an endorphin. You can actually pull this up on YouTube and it'll show it just walking along. It's amazing. In fact, just for the fun of it, that's awesome.
What is that green thing at bottom?
I'm not sure. At one time I actually knew, and to tell you the truth, I don't remember, I haven't, looked at that for a while.
It's like it's carrying something.
Well, it looks like it's attached, or it
Yeah.
came out of it, so I don't know, but I think it's pretty cool. Okay, two gases. They work as neurotransmitters, nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide. Nitrous oxide, also known as capital N, capital O. Carbon monoxide, capital C, capital O. They act as neurotransmitters. They are released by a neuron, and it spreads to other nearby neurons, but they don't have to have receptor sites to affect the other neurons. It sends a signal that will affect the chemical reactions inside the neurons, and therefore they don't have to bind. Nitrous oxide is not stored in vesicles. Wouldn't that be a great test question? Which neurotransmitter is not stored in a vesicle? Nitrous oxide. It can be released from any part of the cell. Nitrous oxide is also responsible for penile erections. It's also responsible for formation of memories. Obviously not at the same time. Let's talk about the endocrine system. Okay? We're going to talk about the the pituitary, the thyroid, the adrenals, the pancreas, and the gonads, and the pituitary. The endocrine system is the glandular system. It's the system that has these organs that secrete chemicals called hormones. We are going to talk about the pituitary, thyroid, pancreas, gonads, and the adrenals. The first one is called the master gland. It is the pituitary. Now, there are two parts to the pituitary, the posterior in the back, the anterior in the front. Now, I promise you, I'm going to pull together why we talk about the glands in psychology, okay? It really does make a difference. Vasopressin, it just regulates the fluid balance in the body, but oxytocin is the love hormone. Oxytocin, okay, yeah, it stimulates uterine contractions during labor and it helps release breast milk, but it's very instrumental in social bonding. It facilitates trust and attachment. And if I'm not mistaken, it's released during hugs. Prolactin stimulates secretion of breast milk. Somatotropin, growth hormone that acts directly on muscles and bones to produce the growth spurt. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. It is linked to memory and learning. It's linked to memory and learning. It also causes the adrenal glands to secrete cortisol, which is used in the production of glucose. Now, all these are the anterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary was the vasopressin and oxytocin, the anterior, prolactin, somatotropin, ACTH, and now TSH. Now, to tell you about TSH, I have to talk about the thyroid. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland located right under your voice box, the larynx. And it has a lot to do with the metabolism, okay? It secretes a hormone called thyroxine. Now, the pituitary is constantly monitoring the thyroxine level. Okay? So it's constantly monitoring it and making sure that the body has the correct level. If the thyroid is putting out the correct amount of thyroxine, if the body has the amount it needs, the pituitary doesn't do anything. But let's say now that it's monitoring this level and it perceives that the level is down. The pituitary now releases a hormone called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so it keeps monitoring this thyroxine level, and it'll keep releasing TSH, which stimulates the thyroid to release more thyroxine. And when the pituitary perceives the thyroxine level has reached the normal level it's supposed to, then it'll stop releasing the TSH. It'll cut it off. Okay? But it never stops monitoring that thyroxine level. So if it drops, it'll start releasing more TSH. Now, you've got the pituitary is monitoring thyroxine, and when it's got too much thyroxine, it will not release the TSH. If it's monitoring the thyroxine and there's not enough, it will release the TSH. Okay, everybody kind of got that? It's really kind of simple, but you won't believe how many people get mixed up on this. Now, let's say a person goes to the doctor, says, "Doctor, I'm cold all the time, my hair is falling out, I've gained a lot of weight, I don't have any energy, and I just want to know what's going on." And the doctor says, "I think that you have a low functioning thyroid." That sounds like a classic case of hypothyroidism. We're going to order up a thyroid panel on you. Now, part of that thyroid panel includes the TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone. The doctor looks at that test and says, "Yes, you have a low functioning thyroid." When he looked at that TSH, is it going to be high or is it going to be low? Yes. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Why did you say that?
Because if they're like, you know, gaining weight, then that means that they're not, you know, getting like enough of that
Exactly.
hormone.
Oh, this is the roll. I need y'all to go ahead and sign the roll. When it comes around to you, I want you to put a little star by it and put EC, cause I'm getting extra credit for that answer.
Okay.
We already signed this, so.
Oh, you did? Oh, I was thinking what'd y'all do, sign it at the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay, I see where you started.
Well,
Okay.
should have done it somewhere else.
That's all right. Let me just do this so I'll know. So if you will, we're gonna put that as extra credit so I won't forget. All right, so, she's absolutely right. The doctor sees that it's a high TSH. Why? Because the pituitary is having to pump more TSH to get the thyroid to produce enough thyroxine for the body's needs. Now, if it was a hyperthyroid, they would have a low TSH, okay? Now, when I was in grad school, I went to the doctor and I said, Doctor, I'm cold all the time. Now, when I told him I was cold all the time, I was going to class with a t-shirt and a shirt and a sweater and a parka, gloves, and a hood, and asking them to turn the heat up in the room. That's how cold I was. I could not get warm. I was gaining weight. I was tired all the time. And, you know, I had all these things that were, you know, going on, and I said, you know, please help me, because I know that something's not right. And he said, you've got a classic case of hypothyroidism. And he said, let's just go ahead and take a blood test and see how much I have to give you, how much supplement I have to give you. He got the test results back and he said, these came back normal. He said, I don't understand, but obviously I'm misdiagnosed, and so just thinking it through, you probably just eat too much and not exercising. So go ahead and start exercising and cutting back on your food and come back in a month. I did that and I gained 5 pounds. And he said, I don't believe that you exercised. I don't believe that you cut back on your food. And so I'm going to tell you that what you need to do is go on a diet and exercise and come back in 6 months, and if you haven't lost weight then we'll talk and see if there's something else going on. Basically, he told me to quit oinking up to the trough and increase my activity. Well, as things happen, I changed jobs, and when I changed jobs, I changed insurance, and I had to find a new doctor. Came down with strep throat. My new doctor, of course, they like to feel that throat. And he goes, did you know you've got a very swollen thyroid? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And he goes, we need to give you a thyroid test and see what's going on. And I said, it's going to come back normal. And he said, no, there's no way it's going to come back normal. I said, it's going to come back normal. It came back normal. And he said, I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. I'm going to send you to an endocrinologist, a person who specialized in glands. I saw the endocrinologist and he said, well, the doctor did everything he was supposed to do. But sometimes family doctors overlook this test, or they don't think about this test. It's called a free TPO. Free TPO. Free TPO's value is supposed to be under 2. And when my test results came back, they were over 75. And he said, you have really got yourself a hot thyroid. And he was not talking about it being stolen or extremely sexy. He was talking about it being very, very inflamed. So, he put me on thyroxine. Now, $1 million question. All of my thyroid tests were normal except for that one measuring how inflamed my thyroid was. Why do you think that he put me on thyroxine when all my tests were normal?
So your pituitary gland would stop producing
Oh my gosh.
too much of the THS,
Not too much.
or too little on that one.
I mean, not, you know, he didn't want any of it being produced. Now, why would that be? Put extra credit next to yours too. He's got you all started now. Why would he, the doctor, not want the TSH to go to the thyroid? And I think you said it already. What'd you say?
So that it would stop producing,
Why?
because it was swollen, it was producing your thyroid was producing too much.
Thyroid was overactive.
Overactive,
Was
yes.
working too
Too
hard.
hard.
It wasn't overactive, it was working too hard. And so, one more step.
So I had to give you the medicine to, yes, cause your pituitary gland to, I guess, produce THS?
No,
No, or to stop the flow of THS.
all right. Now, anybody have a guess why he wanted to stop the flow of TSH?
So it wouldn't burst, like so it wouldn't be overactive, I'm guessing,
All right,
working too much.
it's working too hard, so by not having to release thyroxine,
Kinda like slow it down.
it was slowing it down and making it rest. In fact, it got to the point that we were giving it so much thyroxine, the thyroid wasn't having to produce any. Therefore, it rested and the swelling went down. Very, very interesting the way they can do things like that. And so, here, he gave me the thyroxine, and what was interesting, he said it might take, he said it's probably going to be a minimum of 5 years before you see any possible, any reaction. And at 10 years, it finally returned to the normal size, which I thought was kind of interesting, that long. But the body is a marvelous thing.
Did you not hurt?
No, I didn't feel it. I mean, I just had a lot of symptoms of a thyroid not working correctly, but the thyroid tests were all normal, and so that was throwing off the non-endocrinologists. Interesting things, interesting things. If a person's thyroid is not putting out enough thyroxine, it is said to be hypothyroid. They are likely to start gaining weight, being sensitive to cold, complaining of a decrease in energy, an increase in fatigue, joint pain, and even hair loss. And when I say hair loss, we're not just talking about 1 or 2 little ones straying. We're talking about looking at some hair loss in the sink or in the bottom of the bathtub or shower. Hyperthyroid. Now, don't look at this one, okay? The people I've known that have hyperthyroidism usually are very thin. And they will have bulging eyes. Sometimes it's called fish eyes. or even, frog eyes, okay? Too much thyroxine can cause a heart arrhythmia, which means an irregular heartbeat, okay? Now, when I was diagnosed and I gained this weight, I said, well, doc, you know, if this is the amount that I need, can you bolster it up so maybe it'll increase my metabolism and I can burn some of this fat off that I gained? He said, it doesn't work that way. He said, if we do that, we might interfere with your heart. And he said, we could cause heart arrhythmias, which would throw you into a heart attack. And we don't want to do that. And I said, no, we don't. So, hyperthyroid, one of the things you have to worry about, heart arrhythmias. That test that he gave me was called a free TPO. All right. It is 5 till 1. Let me see if I can get through the pancreas today, and we'll see what we can do. The pancreas is a gland that is responsible for secreting insulin. Insulin regulates the blood sugar in the body. Now, what can cause the pancreas to not operate or function properly? One is a tumor. Pancreas gets tumors. They also get cancer, okay? An infection. One of the most common problems that alcoholics have is pancreatitis, inflammation of the pancreas. A trauma, such as like if you have an accident, automobile accident, and something jams into that pancreas, or that somebody gets in a fight and traumatizes the pancreas, that can cause problems. But the most serious and the most common, not the most serious, but the most common cause is diabetes. Diabetes used to be listed as one of the most common causes of death. We now take it far, far too much for granted. We don't think about it as serious as it should be, and one reason is because a lot of the times the things that the diabetes affects might be the cause of death, when if the diabetes hadn't been there, that problem might not have been there, such as, say, somebody dies of kidney failure, okay? Their kidneys may not have had any problems had it not been for diabetes. A heart attack, a stroke, okay? Another way that we don't respect diabetes like we should, people are taking even the advances and the medicines for granted. I have a friend of mine, and he's a Samoan, big guy, and he has diabetes. Well, he and his wife will go out to supper with Chris and I, and he'll have a good sized supper, okay? Big steak, potato, vegetables, loaf of bread, then, polish off some of his wife's leftovers, and then he'll say, what's for dessert? And everyone say, well, hey guy, you're a diabetic. You really might want to pass up dessert. Don't worry about it, I'll just take some extra insulin when I get home. And that's not the way you're supposed to do it. Insulin is made to try and keep a levelized, balanced blood sugar. It's not to have a blood sugar spike and then you give insulin and make it dip, and then, it's all over the place. You want it to be balanced, okay? Well, diabetes is an inability to control blood sugar in the body. It's caused by either an underactive pancreas or a pancreas that's not secreting any insulin. It is a very, very dangerous disease. It can cause blindness. I believe two things that it can cause is macular degeneration and detached retina. It will increase your risk for heart attacks. It can make you very vulnerable for a heart attack or stroke. It affects the kidneys. It can affect the brain, and it can cause a disease of the nerves called neuropathy. Yes?
What's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes? Because my mom has type 2.
Okay. That is something that I will bring you the answer on Thursday, because I always get confused, and I don't want to tell you something off the top of my head
Yeah,
and then
she
be
has
wrong.
she has neuropathy right now.
Okay, so you're gonna know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Neuropathy is when blood sugar is basically not controlled and the ends of the nerves start dying. And therefore, there's no sensation. When they start this process, it can be very painful. But then, when the nerve ending dies, the area is numb. Now, when a person is diagnosed as being a diabetic, the doctor should take a little time and do some patient education. One of the things he should be doing is talking about the diet, the need for exercise. He should talk to them about, how dangerous it is and how it can affect the body and such. But another thing that he should do is give them education about neuropathy and especially the care of the feet. It is extremely, extremely important for a diabetic to care for their feet. Honestly, it's really recommended that they go see a podiatrist on a regular basis so that they can watch those feet, take care of the toenails, make sure there's no problems there. Because let me give you a hypothetical example of what could happen. Do what?
The gangrene amputation?
You have this lady, and she is very fashion conscious. Very nice looking lady, always looks sharp, and she has just bought some brand new shoes. She's styling and profiling. And she goes out and, to work, and everybody tells her how smooth those shoes look. She looks good, and she is just pumped. I mean, I got all these compliments. And she is just so pleased. But because of neuropathy, she doesn't feel the friction of the shoe on the toe. And we'll even put it like this, she doesn't feel the two toes rubbing together. And so all during the day, all she can think about is how neat it is that she's gotten all these compliments. She is looking good. Rub, 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 and a blister forms. Now she knows she's going to see some different people tomorrow, so she's going to wear these same shoes, have a little different outfit, but she's going to wear these same shoes so that she looks smooth. She looks good. She goes out, rub, 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 the blister bursts. She doesn't feel it. She doesn't feel it because there's no feeling in her feet because of the neuropathy. She's health conscious, so she goes to the gym that night. And she works out, she takes a shower, and her feet are standing in the shower where everybody else's feet have been, and she picks up some bacteria, and it gets into that open wound where the blister is. She hasn't felt the blister, she has no idea. And so now the bacteria has gotten into the wound. She doesn't even know she has a wound. So goes on about life, and the toes get infected. She doesn't know it because she's not feeling it. They become more and more infected until one day her foot is swollen, and she has a hard time getting her foot into the shoe. And she said, "What is going on?" And then she feels the foot with her hand. She goes, "That feels really warm." And she goes, "It's swollen." And she sees a very, very infected area between her toes. She goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh my goodness, this is really severely infected. We've got to really try and be aggressive with this." And he is, but he doesn't realize there's two different types of bacteria at work. And so as he's getting one under control, the other one's still raging and causing it more infection. One day he comes in and he says, "I've got some bad news for you." He said, "This is now into gangrene." And he said, "Your foot now has gangrene, and this is a life-threatening situation. We're going to have to amputate all the way up past the knee to make sure that we get all that infection because it's so aggressive." So now she has a stump. That is not an outrageous story. That is a very, and I'll tell you another likely story. All she has to do is clip her toenails and miss and clip a little bit of skin. She won't know it, and that can set up the same infection. They don't feel it, so they're not aware. That is why a diabetic needs to consistently either go to a podiatrist and or every time she goes or he goes to the physician, they're not going to want to do it, but you make that physician look at your feet. That is part of the health regimen of a diabetic. Those doctors are supposed to be inspecting those feet, checking to see for neuropathy, what's going on. Very, very, very important. Okay? Well, diabetics have to worry about two extremes. Either their blood sugar getting too high or their blood sugar going too low. For the normal person, the blood sugar should be somewhere between 90 and 110. The diabetic the doctors are pretty happy if they can keep it under 130. Okay? Now, if the blood sugar drops low, say below around 80, 75, 80, they'll start becoming symptomatic. And the first thing is they might start saying, "I'm hungry. I'm really getting hungry." They may complain of a hunger headache. As the sugar drops, they may start sweating and becoming shaky. As it drops further, they can become irritable and panicky hunger. "I've got to have something to eat. I've got to have something to eat right now. I'm telling you, I've got to have something to eat." They can complain of being weak, pounding heart, trembling. They can even complain of impaired vision. Their personality can change. And if it gets low enough, the person can pass out. This person, if their blood sugar is getting lower and lower and lower, they're the ones that need sugar. They're the ones that they have to have sugar pretty quick or it can be a life-threatening situation. That's called hypoglycemia. Now, my mother was a diabetic, and she was a little Southern belle. Sweetest thing you ever saw. Everybody loved her. She never said a bad thing about anybody. Just a very kind, loving, sweet person. And her doctor said for her to come in, for her usual appointment, and he wanted her to fast that day because he wanted some blood, tests. And he was called out on an emergency right before we got there. And so the nurse said, well, you know, I'm not sure exactly what all he wants, so he'll be back shortly, and then we'll get everything on the, you know, taken care of. Well, it took him longer than he thought, and she started complaining about being hungry. He sure is taking a long time, and, you know, I haven't eaten, I'm getting kind of hungry, you know. I said, well, Mama, you know, we'll be able to get out of here as soon as he comes, and I'll go get you something to eat just as fast as I can. Okay, but I am getting hungry. A little while later, she goes, I'm getting really hungry. And she goes, I'm starting to feel just a little shaky, you know. And I said, well, Mama, you know, I'm sure he'll be here any minute. A little bit later on, the nurse comes in. Now, this is a nurse that Mother has seen every month for years. She knows my mother, and she goes, well, Miss Sarah, how are you doing? You know, I'm sorry the doctor's so late. Well, that's just the most inconsiderate thing he has ever done. I am not happy. I'm hungry. I cannot understand why he is being so inconsiderate. If we're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock, he's supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. And I mean, she ripped that nurse a new one. And I'm sitting there going, what is happening to my mother? I mean, she did everything but curse, and my mother never cursed a day in her life. And I mean, she was just tearing into that nurse. And the nurse says, what's going on? I said, well, she's been complaining about being hungry. And I said, she's been fasting. She didn't have anything to eat today. And she goes, let's check her blood sugar. Checked her blood sugar, and it was like 50. And she said, we got to get something real quick into this lady. So they ran around, they found some cookies, and Mother just, you know, she goes, okay, that was good, now I need some food. And they said, well, we're going to get you a Coke, Miss Sarah. You know, okay, that's fine, I still want some food. You know, and if you're going to do this to people, y'all need to at least have something here ready for some, you know. And pretty soon, she started leveling off. And her personality started coming back, and she goes, I am so sorry, I don't know what got into me. You know, that was so rude of me to say those kind of things, and just, I can't believe that I would, you know, ladies don't tear into people like that, you know, and the nurse said, Miss Sarah, we understand completely. But she did a 180 on her personality. I mean, she was aggressively hostile, and my mother basically never had a hostile day in her life. High blood sugar, well, if they have a high blood sugar, they can be very confused. But before that happens, they're going to complain, I've got to have some water. I am so thirsty, I cannot stand it. I've got to have some water, and I've got to have this water now. They can't chug enough water. Now, if they're taking in a tremendous amount of water, what's going to happen next? They're going to have it coming out. And so with the increase of fluids, there's going to be an increase in urination. They can be confused. They can complain of weakness. They can complain of blurry vision. Mother would get blurry vision when she got high blood sugar. They might have heavy labored breathing, hot, dry skin. The next slide will say that they will be hungry, and I've never met a person with high blood sugar that was hungry. I worked in hospitals, I worked on the ambulance, I worked in clinics, I taught EMT. I've never had a diabetic high blood sugar and say that they were hungry, but I had 2 students say they were diabetic, and when they got high blood sugar, they were just absolutely ravenous, which really didn't make sense. What they described really was very much hypoglycemia, but they said no, it was hyperglycemia. So I don't know, but generally they're not going to be hungry, okay? A loss of appetite. They can complain of being nauseous, even vomiting. Confusion. My mother had the flu. Taking her into the doctor. She was weak. I had her in a wheelchair, got her into the elevator. We were going up to the doctor's office. A gentleman stepped in on the next floor, and my mother's sitting there in the wheelchair, and she goes, "Mr. Lincoln, oh, you are my favorite president. What an honor. I can't believe I'm meeting you. This is incredible. And, oh, and what you did for our country. Oh, you are the greatest president of all time, and I'm sorry what John Wilkes Booth did to you. I mean, that was just unexcusable. But I just want to tell you how much I admire you and how great you are." And I'm sitting there going, and he's kind of looking strange. I get up to the doctor and I tell him what just happened. And he said, "Let's test her blood sugar." It was 700 plus.
Oh my goodness.
Most people would have been in a coma, and most people would have been hospitalized. He said, "Let's take care of this in the office." And so he started giving her insulin. He got her insulin, blood sugar down, and she went home that day. But I'll never forget that incident where she was convinced this guy was Abraham Lincoln, So that's the confusion. Now, chances are, basically when I do a lecture like this, there's usually at least one person in the room that's a diabetic. For that person, what I'm about ready to say is not meant to be offensive. It's not meant to be insensitive. It's not meant to be rude. But it is common when a diabetic runs a high blood sugar for an extreme time, or extended time, they will develop an odor about them that is like fermented fruit. For lack of a better way, the way I describe it is fermented fruit that's been put in a sneaker and put in a locker for a couple of months. And then you open up that locker and, it's a very fermented, sweet, sweet, sweet odor. And in the past, before police were more educated and then we had more of the equipment we've got, cop would see somebody driving erratic, he'd pull them over, they were confused, they were disoriented, and they smelled sweet. They would confuse that for alcohol, and they'd throw them in the drunk tank. Okay. What to do? What to do if they have low blood sugar? Get them sugar. Then get them to the hospital. If they have high blood sugar, just get them to the hospital. But if you don't know which one, they just collapse and they're diabetic, but you don't know whether they're high blood sugar or low, go ahead and give them some sugar. Because you're not going to hurt them by giving them sugar when they're already high and they're going to be getting to the hospital and getting some insulin. But denying them sugar when they've got a low blood sugar, it can result in death. And so it's definitely worth your while to go ahead and give them sugar when you don't know one way or the other. Okay. High blood sugar, extreme thirst, frequent urination, hot, dry skin, blurred vision. They can become drowsy, complain of nausea. Get them to the doctor. Low blood sugar, shaking, trembling, fast heartbeat, sweating, anxious, panicky, demanding food, dizziness, extreme hunger, panicky hunger, impaired vision, weakness, fatigue, hunger, headache, irritability. Give them sugar. Okay, I'll finish up with this because I shouldn't take too much longer here. diabetic, when they are diagnosed, the doctor will usually talk to them and find out what their diet is. He will talk to them and find out about how much exercise they get, and he'll look at that with the way their blood sugar is running, and he'll determine how much insulin to give them. If you change any one of these things, it's going to affect the blood sugar. So, I had a student that came in one day. He looked a little strange, and then he fell out of his seat and passed out. We called the ambulance, and when he returned to school, he said, well, I'm sorry, but I took my insulin that day and then realized that I was running late for school, and I just came on to school without eating. Now, he had the correct amount of insulin, his exercise hadn't changed, but he didn't have any food for the insulin to act on. So his blood sugar bottomed out. Had another one come in one day, and in the back of the room, I saw him pull out this little kit and check his blood, and then I saw him pull out an insulin, syringe, and give himself some insulin. He came up after class and he said, I'm sorry, I don't want you to think that I was, mainlining or anything. And I said, no, I didn't. And he said, well, because I left today, and he goes, I honestly thought I had breakfast, but I guess I forgot it because my blood sugar was high. And I guess I forgot my insulin, so I went ahead and took my insulin shot so that it would get things back to normal. So, here, he had the food, but he didn't have the insulin. So, his blood sugar was high. Now, my mother was really savvy. I mean, she was smart, and she understood about diabetes, even in her latter years. I mean, she was like 80 when she was diagnosed with diabetes. And she understood what was going on. And one day, I watched her get up, go to the kitchen, and then she came back and she started mopping different floors in the house. And I said, Mother, what are you doing? And she goes, I felt a little strange, and so I went and checked my blood sugar, and it was a little bit high, and it's too early for me to take my insulin for the evening. And so I decided to just go ahead and mop the floor a little bit and see if I can't get that blood sugar down. All right, so she increased the exercise, which stimulated the pancreas. Therefore, she had this correct amount of insulin that the doctor gave her, correct amount of diet, but she increased her exercise and she lowered her blood sugar just enough until supper time when she was supposed to take her second syringe. Okay? Anybody got any questions about any of that?
Is it possible to have symptoms on both sides, like as far as the high blood pressure, not blood pressure, the highs and the lows? Is it possible to have symptoms of them both? Or
At the same time?
Yeah. Like,
I would find that, I'm not gonna say it can't happen. Certainly there are some that overlap, like the vision. Either one can cause problems with the vision. But there are some of them that I really don't think would overlap, like the being extremely thirsty and being extremely hungry at the same time. That'd be kind of odd, But I'm not saying it can't happen. I haven't had any experience with that. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so I was in Spanish, and I was taking a test, and I was like, oh, I don't feel good, at all, and I was like, why is my vision, I'm like, what is happening, and so, I'm just like, okay, let me just go walk up there. I'm like, hey, I need to go to the nurse, I don't feel well, my vision, and I'm really shaky. I'm like, I can feel my heart. She's like, Asia, go back. Like, you know, and go like finish it, you know. Yeah, I was like, okay, fine. And then okay, so yeah, and I'm like walking back. Right here, I like on the ground, on the, you know, floor. My head almost hit this, and I almost like actually, like, but yeah, like I was like just out. And like I can hear like, oh my gosh, you know, and then like they like, you know, call on the, you know, nurse. I'm like, what? And then I wake up, and then like, you know, like nurse is like, here. I'm like, what? You know?
Take something, get some sugar in her, get some sugar in
Yeah.
her.
And they, you know, like snip it. My blood sugar was at 40, like 5 points, like away from not, you know, being here. And so they really like thought, okay, and so like I went to my like, you know, like the, you know, and they thought I like had like, you know, like type
Okay.
1, but no. So after that, I just like switched up, you know, and everything. Then I like, you know, like started, let's call it kneading, right, and like exercising, and so I reversed those what's called like effects. So I was going to have, you know, like I was on, you know, the verge, but I don't know, like I'm just like really like, I just drank this and I'm really like, you know, but okay, like I'm sorry, like I'm just like, yeah. But,
I understand. I understand,
It's
and,
so funny, it was like a really long day.
And another thing is, a lot of times, what'll happen is somebody have a low blood sugar, and then everybody will give them candy and Coke and all this stuff, and that shoots their blood sugar real high, and then they start crashing again. And so they've got all kinds of problems with their metabolism just going crazy, like you're talking about. All right. Well, looks like it's 1:30, so we'll continue this on Thursday, and we will finish up this chapter on Thursday. So, you all take care, have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. I don't think so. If you finished everything on Unit 1, I'll have to check, because there's only supposed to be one quiz with the biological chapter, and I can't find it. The blackboard looks like they ate it. And so I've got to figure out what happened to it. So right now, if you caught up with chapter, with Unit 1, you're good.